City of Durango City Council regular meeting, June 1st, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. May we have a roll call, please?
Councillor Bosmans?
Present.
Councillor Buell? Here. Councillor Youssef? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Nosworthy? Present. And Mayor Baxter?
Present. Do we have, this is item number 3, the identification of actual or perceived conflicts of interest. Does anyone anticipate having such? I'm back. Oh, I'm on Victor's. No. Does anyone have a perceived or actual conflict of interest on any agenda topic today? Thank you. Victor, could you darken that? There's a time lag and it's a little distracting, unless everybody wants to see what we're broadcasting. Okay, so public participation. This section of the agenda is set aside for the public to provide comments or ask questions regarding items that are not scheduled for a hearing or public testimony, or that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. City Council will not respond to questions from the dais. Citizens should address their comments directly to the City Council. We will have a moderator who will promote you to a speaker, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. Tom, are you handling this, or is Victor doing it?
Sorry, you're on the public participation?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, sorry. Okay, we do have 3 people who are in the wings waiting to speak. The first person in line is Karen Pontius. Karen, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you, and then you will have 3 minutes to speak. If you could state your name and whether you are a city resident.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Good evening, Council. My name's Karen Pontius. I live at 288 Animas View Drive in Durango City. I'm here today to ask the Council to approve a loan of $500,000 to our mobile home park. I'm asking for our 116 households, over 80% of them low and very low income. We residents are buying the park as a co-op to stabilize lot rents for 10 years. It'll be a solid investment. You could see it as fulfilling campaign commitments expressed by so many over the last decade or so. In fact, the Council has made affordable housing a priority as articulated in the Durango Housing Plan and the City Council Policy Goals Part D. Acting on opportunities like ours fits these goals versus holding on to funds that are needed now. 2 weeks ago, you discussed this issue, and we were happy to be represented by Lisa Blomquist Palmer of the Homes Fund and Andy Cadlick of Thistle. They spoke eloquently about the need for this loan. The councilors seemed to want more information than was presented in City Manager Jose Madrigal's 41-page staff report, so I hope you have since received that information. During that discussion, a councilor was musing that the city's loan would not appreciably help our residents. He said, "We know the residents are making this decision for their own building of wealth." This statement really struck me. What I heard first as arrogance was, I believe, actually ignorance of mobile homes and that segment of home ownership in general. First, no one buys a mobile home in a park to build wealth. When you buy one, you get the title at the DMV. They depreciate like cars and are notoriously poor investments. You still have to pay lot rent. People live here because they need a roof over their heads. Come walk through our park and see. No one here is building wealth. Our residents have been struggling harder for the last 5 years since the park went through private...
Sorry, I had to cut you off. I had to get into public participation. But give me a call.
You're on the meeting.
Tom, we can hear you talking. Sorry, Karen.
Reclaiming the time?
Yeah, we'll give you your 10, 15 seconds back. Go ahead.
Thank you. Our residents have been struggling harder for the last 5 years since the park went from private ownership to a series of corporate owners. Lot rent went up over 100% in those years. What if your mortgage payment went up 100% over 5 years? How would you ever manage it? Most people here live paycheck to paycheck. Long-term financial plans to build wealth are really not even on the table. Families struggle to ensure basic needs. Durango's Fair Share program only exists because developers do not want to build affordable housing. Instead, they choose the option to pay a fee in lieu of developing such housing. As a result, years have passed without enough affordable units being built here in Durango. Supporting our park purchase is a way to impact 116 households that no one even had to build. My last request, if public support for this does not move you tonight to loan the mobile home park funds, I ask that you take that same money and donate it to a rental assistance fund that we have set up with Southwest Community Foundation. Then our most needy residents can apply for the support they need and receive it directly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Tom, are there others to be admitted?
All right, sorry about that, Kim.
No.
Next on the list, we have Coral Smith. Coral, I'm going to unmute you. If you could state your name and whether or not you are a city resident, you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, my name is Coral Smith, and yes, I am a resident of the city of Durango and also a resident of the Animas View Mobile Home Park. I'm specifically speaking towards how the city can absolutely fund affordable housing for a time to come indefinitely. This is an opportunity that as a park we would never have the opportunity to do without state law, without people willing to give us money, and without all the community that has come together from the state of Colorado to help us purchase this park. That being said, the city of Durango has this opportunity as well. It was mentioned by Lisa last time that it would take 5 years to help this many families get into affordable housing. And that's just something that you have the opportunity to help by lowering a person's monthly lot rent by $20. That's what this $500,000 that we're asking for would accomplish. And while that $20 means very little to certain people, it's the difference between eating and not eating for many in our park. So I would respectfully ask that you guys really consider the impact you can have on our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Coral. Tom?
All right, next up on the list, we have William Harris. William, I'm going to unmute
All right, thank you, baby.
your call. If you could go ahead and just state your name and whether or not you are a city resident, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I am William Harris. I have been blessed to live and work in Durango. I live at Animas View Mobile Home Park Cooperative. I remember Ted Cooper, my first landlord, yes, that long ago, and how hard he worked to maintain the park and yet try to keep the rent down. We, the cooperative, now know those responsibilities, costs, and the aging condition of the infrastructure. Since the Coopers, we have had several new landlords that increased rent, but did not improve the infrastructure. We, the cooperative, want those responsibilities as we move forward to create an environment for affordable housing. This is the depth of our commitment. Over the past several months, we formed committees to create our rules, regulations, and bylaws, which we will use to maintain the cooperative as a good environment, a place for affordable housing. Consider a young couple starting out in Durango. City Council members, I ask you, did you have this struggle, working more than one job to make ends meet? I understand the City of Durango has helped other locations with affordable housing. How may I see this list? And can Animas View Mobile Home Park Cooperative be added to that list? Is it true that the funds the City of Durango uses to assist the affordable housing come from developers that do not want to build affordable housing and in so doing pay this fee toward the Fair Share Fund? Has this fund ever been depleted? Is it constantly paid into? I ask the city of Durango to help us, help others to have affordable housing. It would give me tremendous joy to see the state of Colorado applaud the city of Durango as a leader in giving a helping hand to a resident-owned community. City Council of Durango, thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, William. Tom, are there others?
Yes, next on the list, we have Ann Marquard. Ann, I'm going to unmute you. If you could also unmute yourself on your end and state your name and whether or not you are a city resident. I'll give you 3 minutes on the clock.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, my name is Ann Marquard. I am a city resident on East 6th Avenue. I am part of this call both because I believe in this as a social justice issue, but I thought about it in a macro sense rather than in a very personal sense until recently. I was fortunate enough to come to this city 38 years ago when homes were indeed affordable, when I, as a single person, could afford to buy in and have a home that accrued value. That was great. However, now I've become involved with the family that we're trying to move into this mobile home park. It's not a static set of residents. People come and go. We are giving an opportunity to a family who is living currently in a condemned building and are about to have to move into their cars. We are giving them an opportunity to move into this mobile home park. And the question is, will they be able to afford the $700 a month rent, or will it, God forbid, go up to $960 on the open market, which is simply unaffordable, including a mortgage on a very cheap, poor piece of home that they are willing to put equity into, scrub equity into, and make a beautiful place. These are people who care for our children. They feed us in restaurants. They are not building huge equity. They are trying to eke out a living and make a better life for their children. And I encourage you strongly to back this mobile home park. Realize that their lenders have been successful in over 260 parks so far. Their refinance at 10 years is assured with them. Please give these guys a break. Give the 116 families a break that are trying desperately to carve out a living so they can care for us all and be good citizens to them. We will be able to accrue more money for affordable housing funds because of all of the rabid developments in this county and city going on right now. Please give this consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Tom, are there others?
There are others. Next on the list, we have Thomas. Thomas, I'm going to mute you if you want to go ahead and state your name and whether you are a city resident. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Fritz. I, too, am a resident of Durango, as well as a resident of Animas Mobile Home Park. I have been living in the Durango area since 1999. I have retired here. I love this area. It's a very beautiful community. Our park is one of the nicest parks that I've lived in, and I've seen several of them around here. Every bit of help that the city can do for us will, like my other residents have noted, will help reduce our monthly payment. And it would go a long way because, like myself, when I moved in here, I was paying $350 a month with the Coopers. Now I'm at $750 a month. That's a big increase, especially when you're on retirement. You know, so every bit of help from the city is grateful because this is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best cities that I have lived in my whole life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Tom?
All right, next on the list, we have Mark Gehring. Mark, I'm going to unmute you. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself on your end, state your name and whether or not you're a city resident. We'll put 3 minutes on the clock.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great. I'm sadly not a resident of Durango. I did grow up summering there when my folks lived in Bayfield and then later in Durango. I'm the manager of Common Good Management Services. We're a property management company that's organized as a co-op, and we're set to be of service to the Animas View co-op after the purchase. I'd like to speak just for my time in support of the loan to the co-op. First, starting off kind of super big picture, co-ops are really not well known or understood in the U.S., but there are many thousands of examples in a wide range of sectors. Co-ops often form when there are real problems facing people and communities. For example, electric co-ops formed in the U.S. when investors wouldn't run lines in rural America, right? Real problem. How do we get the lights on? A co-op formed to solve that problem. In the resident-owned community co-op sector, there are about 300 resident-owned co-ops across the U.S. And there's a strong support for co-ops like Animas View forming. In their case, they're working together to be champions in creating affordable housing for themselves and for the generations of residents that are gonna follow them. An important element to understand about co-ops is that access to capital is a real challenge. In the investor-owned model, you just sell shares to whoever has money, who's looking for the return on investment. In a co-op, in this case, the residents don't have a lot of money to put in, and there's going to be a lot of debt financing involved. And so access to affordable capital is going to be a really important element of their success. That said, it's so cool to watch co-ops form and how people learn how to manage their own business and their own community. And on a side benefit, I think, of your loan to Animas View, not only will it help provide the affordable housing there, but you're also investing in leadership and community development of the residents. And just imagine down the road how this group has learned how to manage both their business and their association successfully together. It's really a pretty cool thing to watch, and that you can be part of that story, I think is worth investing in. So thanks for your time and consideration. Our group, which is a co-op, is really enthused to be able to be of service to them, and wishing them all the success. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you, Mark. Tom?
Okay, next on the list, we have Nikki Collett. Nikki, I'm going to unmute you. If you want to unmute yourself on your end and state whether or not you are a city resident, I will give you 3 minutes on the clock.
All right. Yes, my name is Nikki Collett, and I do live in the Animas View Mobile Home Park. We just love living here, and we do live paycheck to paycheck. And I just wanted to say that we would truly appreciate any help the city's willing to give us. And all of our neighbors are just really hard workers and grateful people. And I just really wanted to get on here and thank you for all your time and considerations regarding this. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Right, next on the list, we have Judy Hart. Judy, I'm going to unmute you and put 3 minutes on the clock if you want to state your name and whether or not you're a city resident.
Yes, my name's Judy Hart, and I am a resident of the...
Oops. Sorry, Judy. I'm going to try that again. If you could unmute yourself, I accidentally hit the wrong button.
And you might want to restart the clock.
My name is Judy Hart, and yes, I am a resident of Durango and also of Animas View Mobile Home Park. I've lived in the park for 8 years. I have lived in Durango off and on since 75 and permanently since 1980. I raised both my sons here, and when I became a single woman, I had to move into affordable housing, moved in first to another mobile home park in Durango, and then 8 years ago into this one. And yeah, it's the only way I can afford to live in Durango. And Like I said, I've lived here for 8 years, and the only reason that we got this opportunity to be able to buy ourselves out of corporate owned, they are using us like cattle as stock investments and keep raising our rents. As others have said, it's gone up more than 100% in the last 5 years. So the beauty of this is that in 2020, by state law, we were given this opportunity because the state enacted a law that they had to give us notification that they were going to do this flipping within the system again, sell us off to another investor. So that we luckily had a group of people willing to jump in, and all of us worked really hard to get here. It's been an awesome thing to watch in this community. We got over 90% of our members to vote yes, even though knowing that this could put many of them right on the cusp of not being able to afford to pay rent month to month at this high interest loan rate that we may be facing without assistance. And we're not asking for free money, and we're not getting free money. What we're asking for is low interest loans, that we can lower that debt so that we can have lower monthly rents for everybody. There are many people in the park on Social Security. I'm helping one of my neighbors who's 88 years old and is also on that cusp. We have committees forming to help each other in rental assistance, in getting that kind of help, and also in maintenance and ride share, getting to doctor's office, that kind of thing. We're really becoming a neighborhood community, and it's really pulling together very beautifully. It's an incredible thing to watch. It's completely changed the culture here in this park, and there's a lot of people that are very happy and willing to work together to get our needs met and taken care of. So I really ask you all to consider this as support of community building here in Durango for the long term. This puts this property in perpetuity for affordable housing forever. So thanks so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Judy. Tom?
Okay, next up is Kathleen Costello. Kathleen, if you want to state your name and whether or not you live in the city, I will go ahead and unmute you and put 3 minutes on the clock.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Costello. I too am a resident of the Animas View Mobile Home Park. I've been here for 10 years. I have seen our rents increase with the sale of the mobile home park to more profit-based ownership. And I just wanted to make a couple comments based on the meeting that was held March 18th and some of the concerns raised by the city council members or former city council members as well, is that one was that they were afraid this would set a precedence for other low income or anybody who considers themselves low income to come and request funds from the city, and that the city shouldn't be a bank. Our co-op in designing the co-op has put tremendous safeguards into our entire structure that maintains our park as an affordable housing community in perpetuity. And so we are not looking to profit, we are looking to maintain our living here. The other object I thought that wasn't quite clear is that the loan we're asking for is not coming from a line item in the city budget. It's coming from the fees that have been paid by developers as part of the fair share ordinance as fee in lieu of development of affordable housing. I have thoroughly investigated my options for access to independent, attainable housing here in Durango over the last 20 years I've lived here. And I am currently on the deed restricted housing wait list for the Metz Lane Mountain Trace affordable housing deed restricted opportunities should they arise. They arise very infrequently, and they are on a tiered income status of offering. I make just edged out of income for mortgage assistance through the Homes Fund. And I have looked at what's out there and available and have decided that living in my mobile home is the most affordable and sustainable option for me. And I will continue to invest in my mobile home to maintain that status. I think that the fund we're asking for will assist my fellow neighbors that are retired, that are working in the service jobs, that are supporting the rest of this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Tom?
Next up, we have Dan Hunt. Dan, if you would like to state your name and whether or not you are a city resident, I've unmuted you and I'll put 3 minutes on the clock.
I'm Dan Hunt and live in Durango at 288 Animas View Drive. I'm a resident at Riverview Mobile Home Park, and I'm the operations manager on the board of directors for the Animas View MHP Co-op. The mobile home park meets zoning requirements for a location, and several months ago we began talking to city staff about possibly adding a restriction to the use of the property to that of a mobile home park. This needs to be explored further. As a condition of our primary lender, ROC Capital, no member of the co-op can financially benefit should the park ever sell. All proceeds would go to a nonprofit. A membership costs $100, and that is all it will ever be worth. Please remember this: no member of the co-op can financially benefit from membership. There is a concern that issues with refinancing could cause us to lose the park. This is only in a broad sense, and only if the American economy has a lot of problems. I say this because the solution is to raise rents sufficiently to cover loans, should interest rates be high in 10 years. We've already talked with the local bank on what that would look like. One way to reduce the interest rate is by becoming a nonprofit. The reduced federal tax the bank saves by lending to a nonprofit can be used to lower the interest rate. The downside to rent increases is that every time rents go up, the risk increases that residents will be displaced, only to be replaced by residents earning more. Over time, this would decrease the number of residents at lower percentages of AMI. Currently, 25% of our residents are below 30% AMI, and 80% are below 80% AMI. Reading verbatim from the Durango Housing Plan, January 2018. On page 10, 0 to 30% AMI is considered critical needs, permanent supportive housing. Again on page 10, 30 to 80% AMI, affordable and attainable. These income levels are specific enough to serve as a basis for funding programs. This project covers each of these points at an exceptionally low cost per household. There has already been a $50 rent increase here, and we are working hard to minimize the rent increase necessary to buy the park to lessen the possibility of displacement. Please support us by voting for the loan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Tom?
Next up, we have Sue Hinkle. Sue, I am going to unmute you on my end. If you could also unmute yourself on your end and then state your name and whether or not you're a city resident, I'll put 3 minutes on the clock.
Sue, are you there?
Still there, Sue?
Maybe we could move on to Judy and come back to Sue?
Yeah, that sounds good. Judy, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. This is Judy Willis. If you would like to state your name and whether or not you're a city resident, I'll go ahead and put 3 minutes on the clock. If you want to unmute yourself, Judy. If you're there, Judy, we can't hear you. If you can unmute yourself.
Okay, maybe we go back to Sue. I saw Sue put her hand down and then back up, so she might be ready now.
Oh, Sue has disappeared.
Sue's, okay. And let's try Judy one more time then. Oops, there's Sue again.
All right, Judy, can you hear us now? Looks like you're not muted, but we're not getting any sound coming through. Let's go back, maybe try Sue again.
Sounds good.
I am striking out on both of those.
Okay, and there are no others that have their hands raised?
No others at the, oh, so we got one more, two more.
Right, and then we'll come back and try Judy and Sue again.
Let's try those. Let's try Kirby Mclaren. Kirby, I'm going to go ahead and bring you in if you want to state your name and whether or not you're a city resident. I will put 3 minutes on the clock.
Good evening, councilor friends. Okay, I heard a little feedback here, but I think I fixed that. Thank you all very much for stepping up to serve our community. I know how hard city council work is, and that you're not often appreciated. To reference the Animas View Mobile Home Park, where I do live here in the city, should have said that up front. Please consider the following points. First, our park has at least 25 households with under 30% AMI, which equates to roughly $1,973 per month. In casual conversation, I've learned of 5 households with total income of less than $1,000 a month. That's speaking with my neighbors here in the park. I feel certain there are more. So please note the AMI category. Hold on just a sec. We have a dog zoo going on here. So please note the AMI categories pull the eye by stating the highest income per category. Many fall well below. 80% of our resident households fall below 80% AMI. I believe that's the cutoff point for affordable housing per city definitions. Fifth point, as Andy Cadlick of Thistle explained at the last city council meeting, our co-op's articles of incorporation and bylaws dictate that the park property be used only for the purpose of affordable low-income housing in perpetuity. This was required too by our lender, Rock Capital, before they would fund us. Our bylaws also dictate that our board favor lower income new members when homes come up for sale. Another requirement by Rock that will ensure that the community does not become gentrified. If the council is concerned that some park residents with incomes above 80% AMI receive assistance, one option, as I believe Karen Pontius said, is to create a reliable line item fund for the Southwest Community Foundation's Rental Assistance Fund set up for our park, which via means testing will target funds for the most vulnerable among us. I asked for a line item funding because I've become really tuned in the past 6 months to how important stability is for these residents. I'll wind up quick. Our co-op's chances of being funded for our first 10-year loans, after our first 10-year loans, are very good. Thanks for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Kirby.
Hey, Kim, I'm getting a flag that Sue Hinkle can speak if I promote her to panelist because she's on an older version of Zoom. If that's okay, I'll just go ahead and bring her in that way.
Sure.
Okay, Sue, you have been promoted to speak. If you want to go ahead and just state your name, whether or not you're a city resident, I'll put 3 minutes on the clock.
Health, right? Yes? Great. I am a resident. I do live in the mobile home park here, and I have been wondering what the council's hope is for the Fair Shares funds. It seems that plenty has gone into this fund, into this pot, as developers aren't willing to build low-income housing. Or anytime soon at that matter. So is there hope for these funds to go to other developments such as Lumion or the Marymount rental buildings? And if that's the case, I see that as highly unlikely due to the high cost of materials right now to build. And so with that said, we are a stable, well-established community with over 100 households. We aren't going anywhere. Many of us hopefully aren't going anywhere. And the money would be well utilized, and we would be so grateful if you could let that money come to our community. So that's all I have to say, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Sue. Tom?
All right, we have one more person to go at this point, Tracy Stewart. Tracy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you want to go ahead and unmute your microphone, I'll put 3 minutes on the clock. And if you could say if you are a resident of the city of Durango.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tracy Stewart, and I am not a citizen of Durango. I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm here representing the Colorado Health Foundation, which is one of the low interest rate lenders to this project, and I was invited to speak to you all about why we think that this project is so important, not just to the city of Durango, but as a model that can be used across the state of Colorado. And I just said all that. Now I'm wondering if you guys can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Okay. So the Colorado Health Foundation is here to support all levels of health equity across the state. Our vision is to see and make sure that folks have access to a thriving life that involves the best possible health care and the best possible quality of life in a healthful way that anyone can. And a big part of that we all are coming to understand, especially during COVID times, is just how important housing is as a foundation to overall health and access to a healthy lifestyle. And so when we heard about what was going on in Durango at Animas View, we got really, really excited for a couple of reasons. One, as other people have mentioned, this is definitely a community-led conversation. These are community folks who have come up with their own solution for staying housed, staying stabilized, and also reaching their best possible health outcomes. The other conversation here was a conversation about displacement, which we are finding out is sort of the mobile home parks are sort of the targeted displacement pieces for rural. And so Animas View is one of 25 separate parks that is slated for purchase and or sale, all owned by one portfolio person. And we think that that's an unfair conversation between actual residents and the corporate structure that owns the park. So we really look at the work and the modeling that the folks here have done as a way to spread that around the state of Colorado for different workers in different parts, largely in rural, who are looking to maintain affordable housing, maintain stability, and live out their best possible lives. And so that is why the Health Foundation is heavily engaged, and we are very excited to be a part of this project. I can't ask you to vote because we're not allowed to do that, but I think you can tell by my tone where I stand. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Tom, do we have any more public comment?
There is nobody else who is lined up to speak at this moment, Mayor. For anyone out there, if you would like to provide a comment or ask a question, now is your chance. no one else is showing up, Mayor.
All right, thank you everyone for, oops, we got one more.
Oops, sorry.
That's
Lindy.
okay.
Sorry, Lindy Hunt, we have one more to go. Lindy, I'm going to unmute you, bring you in if you want to state your name, whether or not you are a city resident. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock.
Hi, sorry it took me a while to figure out how to raise my hand on the phone. I am a resident of Durango and I live in the park. Dan Hunt is my husband. And I just want to reply to a comment that one of the council people made at the last meeting about wealth accumulation, and they didn't feel that it was a project that would be appropriate because they thought that the residents were accumulating wealth. First of all, the co-op is the owner, not the individuals. So the individuals are not accumulating any wealth from the co-op or from any loans, or should the co-op sell, we wouldn't individually receive any money. But the thing that really troubles me is the funds that we're requesting are funds that are used normally to help with the purchase of a stick-built house. And traditionally, stick-built houses appreciate in value. So if you want to say that someone is gaining wealth accumulation, someone that's using these funds to buy a stick-built house has a much greater possibility of accumulating some kinds of appreciation. Traditionally, manufactured homes, mobile homes, trailers, whatever you want to call them, depreciate in value. So the thought that we might be accumulating wealth based on this loan that we've requested is, it doesn't make sense when you think about it in those terms. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time and for your efforts.
Thank you very much, Lindy.
And that's a good reminder, if anybody else out in the public is calling in, it's *9 to raise your hand on the phone. And with that in mind, there is nobody else currently lined up. Give it a few more seconds if you want.
I think we got it. Thank you very much to everyone for speaking up in public comment. We're on to proclamations and presentations. 5.1 is Animas High School relocation to Fort Lewis College. And I believe we have a staff person for that.
Well, I would ask Tom to promote Sean Wojtek from Animas High. He was going to do a brief slide presentation and talk to you about the new project up at FLC.
Thank you.
Good evening, Sean.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. I believe there's a PowerPoint that I sent your way to show the City Council where we are at in our project. And as a reminder, my name is Sean Wojtek. I'm the head of school at Animas High School, and I'm presenting tonight on our progress with our new facility that we are building on Fort Lewis College's campus, with the aim of breaking ground this summer and moving into this new permanent facility after being in 2 temporary facilities for the last 12 years. We will be in this new facility as long as we don't have a bad winter by fall of 2022.
Tom, would it be possible for you to bring up the presentation that's in the presentations folder?
Yeah, I'm going to have to ask City Clerk if they have a copy of that, because I'm not sure where that actually is right now.
I can also share my screen if that's helpful.
Yeah, why don't you go and do that, Sean?
Okay. Great. Can everybody see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Perfect. Well, as I was just mentioning, here's our design schedule that we are hoping to break it up into a couple different phases of doing site utilities this month, and then getting into foundation by August or September, and then going vertical by September or October. Just depends on how quickly we can get those utilities in. And then I would like to show you the actual fun part, because yes, it's great that we have dates, but I'm sure you would be very excited to see our actual visuals. So this will be the view from the back side of our school overlooking the city of Durango, which for those of you who know where we are currently at, we are essentially all the way in the back in our brown, beautiful modulars right now. And we'll be moving into this beautiful space, like I said, in roughly about 18 months. So there's gonna be a quick video that shows the exterior of the building. As you will notice, it's a 2-story building. Our students will no longer have to go between buildings, which for a lot of safety reasons and also just weather reasons will be phenomenal that our students can actually be in covered spaces permanently for the 8 hours that they are at school. We will have a couple outdoor patios for our students to do some outdoor work. We will have enough parking, which again, if you're familiar with our school, our students currently park in a dirt parking lot about a quarter mile away and walk up a trail, and now they will just be able to get out of their cars and walk to our school. They'll be able to take the T, since it stops up at the fort. Durango 9R will be continuing to provide transportation, and as everyone's familiar in Durango, there are lots of trails for our students to bike and walk in order to get up this campus. So our accessibility will be much improved by being up at this new campus. And as you can see, it's a much more beautiful setting and allows us to do a lot of collaboration with Fort Lewis College. So here's our actual footprint. If you are familiar with Fort Lewis College, up to the north here is where the Bader Snyder residency halls are. And we're working with Fort Lewis College to turn what right now is a kind of a 3-way intersection into a 4-way stop that eventually they will be able to use to expand out to the point whenever they see the need to do that. And then here is our first floor design. We will have a makerspace on this first floor in a universal shop that will allow all of our students to actually do their projects rather than clean them up every day. We will have an enormous commons area that it is not necessarily enormous if you're used to going to traditional schools, but it'll be a huge space for us. And then as you can see, that art studio will be having that view that I first showed you in that first slide. And then our second floor will be some additional classrooms. We're going to have a music performing arts studio. We currently collaborate with I Am Music, and we're working with them to make sure that this is a state-of-the-art music studio and design for performance and for recording. We'll also, first in our history, actually have a science lab that our science teachers will be able to stay in the building instead of walking over to Fort Lewis College to use their facilities. And then a couple more exterior visuals for you. And lastly, there'll be a quick 3-minute interior fly through for you. And as you see, we'll actually have a secure vestibule, which if you've been out to our current location, that does not currently exist. We do have some swipe cards, but visitors will actually have to get buzzed into our facility. Nice spacious hallways with that second floor view up there so that we have sunlight from the first floor to the second floor and are using minimal amount of electricity so we can just use that daylight. As we're walking into that common space that all of our students will be able to utilize, and we also envision it as a community facility that can spill out into the patio that we can lend out to community members, we can use for our purposes. We're working with Devo to see if we can partner with them. Ideally, this is not just a 8 to 4 school anymore. It's a whole community facility since it is located in a great location with Fort Lewis College, but also centrally located for the Durango area. As you see, there'll be lots of windows, which is a novelty in our current school. I think everyone's going to be super surprised when they actually walk into this and can see both outside and into the different classrooms. And then one of the unique features of our building is that instead of having a traditional administrative suite whenever all the visitors walk into the building, we're going to be spread out into 3 different locations. So we're walking into what would be our college counselor's office and our assistant head of school's office and a conference room. And then back where it turned over a little bit is our special ed department. And then our head of school and registrar and business office will be all located on the first floor. So the goal is that all of us non-instructional staff are easily accessible to students because that's a huge part of our school. And then here's another small gathering space for our students to be doing work, doing group work, eating lunch, having small group discussions with their teachers or amongst themselves, and then another view up to the second floor. We're still trying to figure out what these little metal things will be in between. They're great for showing student work, but they also minimize what our space is for our hallway. And here's another view with a little added color to what hopefully will not just be white walls when we actually move in. And that is our beautiful school that hopefully we can pull off between now and fall of 22.
Thank you, Sean.
I will open it up for any questions that you all may have.
Would you be willing to unshare your screen so we can all see each other?
Yes, that would probably actually be a good idea, wouldn't it?
Thank you. I had one question. I did not see a cafeteria or the like.
Yeah, so that is something, since I've been here, we've been gathering feedback from our students and families and our alumni, and we currently utilize restaurants in town for our lunches. And that was a universal, probably the only universal decision that's ever been made at Animas High School, that they want to continue to have cater lunches. And it's something that for our free and reduced lunch students, we pay the full $6, and they're able to get Zia, they're able to get a whole bunch of different options this year. Zia was our main option this year just because of COVID, and we're able to work with them and provide a rather large demand for our menu. But in past, we've done East by Southwest, we've done Grassburger, but it really is trying to bring in the community and give that college feel to our students.
That's a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, council?
Question and a comment. Hi, Sean. Really nice to see you. Will this be an open or closed campus?
So our goal right now is to continue what we have right now, which is closed campus except for our seniors. And the main reason why our seniors, it's not a closed campus, is their senior project and their internship projects, they're off campus. And both of those are very much adult world experiences. And if we trust them to be doing that, then and also leaving in the middle of the day to do those internships, it's kind of hard to have a closed campus with our seniors, but everybody else, we still plan to have a closed campus.
Great. And I just wanted to say congratulations. I mean, for me to see the video, as someone who had a kid in the first class of Animas High School in the first building before the modulars, where the Yellow Carrot currently is, what a transformation it will be. And it's going to be so fun to be able to welcome your alma maters back and to show them the growth. I will say that what Animas High School has done is proven that the model of project-based instruction works. The facilities have clearly been a hindrance ever since inception. And to be at the stage where you are now is just phenomenal, and it's wonderful to see. And it's going to be great for our entire community because choice in education provides great value throughout the entire community. It is one of the strongest things that can have an impact on the community. So I just applaud all of your efforts, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And I also would be remiss if I did not thank the Durango 9R and Durango voters in general, because through the bond measure that was passed in November and the Building Excellent Schools and the Community Foundation, this is really a community-wide effort to be able to make this happen.
which makes it all the more special. The collaboration with all the schools is great. Thank you so much.
Mayor Baxter, if I might just add a couple of final thoughts. We've been working with Sean and his team in community development and transportation for a number of months now. As councilors, you may know, the city of Durango does not have regulatory control over development of schools. So in this case, we have a public school going on a state college campus. So we really don't have anything to say about what they put on the ground. They obviously have to meet state standards for a number of things. Where we do, I think, collaborate closely is on utility connections, as well as we are working with them on their traffic study to make sure the impacts on the neighborhoods are limited. But as we have done with some of the other schools that have developed in the last couple of years that are independent, we've worked very closely, and I think we've ultimately ended up with a pretty good product. Later this evening, there is something on your consent agenda related to the easements needed for utilities. And Sean will be presenting to the Planning Commission later this month, at which time they'll get the very similar presentation.
Wonderful. Congratulations, Sean. This is great. Any other comments by council? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 5.2, presentation regarding financial policies recommended by Strategy and Long-Term Finance Advisory Board. And I believe we have a staff member presenting this.
I thought I saw Devin on the line. Tom will have to promote her because I don't see her on this side.
Yes, she is in the attendees.
She's on her way over right now. Okay, Devin, you have been promoted to panelist. If you want to unmute yourself, you're good to go.
And give us your video too, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Devin Schmidt. I'm the Budget and Strategic Planning Manager. I do believe that Cynthia Sneed, if she's in the panelist, she's actually the one who will be presenting this evening. So apologies for the communication there. Are you seeing her, Tom, to promote her? Oh, there she is. So I'm happy to talk, but I will turn it over to the expert. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight just to give you, I'm Cynthia Sneed, Finance Director. I'm here tonight to give you just a quick presentation to introduce the topic generally of financial policies, but also to talk about the three specific policies that are going to be on the consent agenda for tonight. I need to share my screen. Are you able to see that?
We are. Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay, great. Whoa. Okay, so our first slide is the mission and vision from the strategic plan, as always. And of course, no surprise, this particular one speaks to the financial excellence and transparency goal. Okay, so what are financial policies? Financial policies are key elements to sound financial management. They provide guidelines or rules of the game for operational and strategic decision-making, and they help identify acceptable, preferred, or unacceptable courses of action under defined circumstances and establish the parameters for those financial decisions. And it also provides a standard for which to judge performance. Okay, why are financial policies important? Why do we want to see that? So it institutionalizes good financial management practices. So councils and staff change over time. So what these policies will do is to promote continuity and stability in those financial decisions. defines limits on the actions that staff can take. That's the provide a framework for financial accountability. Therefore, important decisions stay with council. And it provides guidance and reference points for actions in difficult times. And a classic example where we just emerged from in the COVID, if we had had the financial policies in place, we would have known exactly what to do when. Staff did an excellent job of that anyway without the policy, but that's another reason for the policies. And the strategic intent requires long-term perspective. So that promotes the long-term and strategic thinking, and it manages risks. So with our public accountability that we have, that includes mitigating risks and the council's pursuit of the public goals, and it identifies important risks to financial condition, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Okay, examples of financial policies that you can see here. I don't need to read them off all to you. Now, many of these are going to be forthcoming at other policies that we are going to be bringing forward as well. And maybe you'll notice the capital improvement planning item. That's one that was already adopted by council a couple of months ago. So for tonight, what's on the agenda are these three particular policies, which is the general fund reserve policy, the operating budget policy, and the long-term financial planning and forecasting policy. And in my opinion, these three are really the basic foundational policies, which we will then build up from there as we really build up our financial acumen here at the city. So all three of these policies have been vetted through the SALT-FAB, and these are their policies that they're recommending that we're bringing forward tonight. So the first one is the general fund reserve policy. Reserves are what I consider the cornerstone of financial flexibility. It gives council the ability to make decisions that come after the budget policy or budget process. The general fund clearly is the most visible of all of our funds, and so it's most important for that fund to have a sound sound reserve policy. So you may recall back in August of 2020 that there was a memo to City Council coming from SALT-FAB where they were recommending a goal of 25% of operating expenditures for the reserve. Now that was the goal. They also said a minimum of 16% would be their recommendation, with the expectation that we would build towards the 25% goal. So why 25%? That represents 3 months of operating expenditures, which gives time to respond if things need, if we have a huge, severe economic downturn, to kind of respond to that and continue operations at that level. So as part of this process that the SALT-FAB went through, we did survey a number of cities, mostly in Colorado, and the general range was from about 10% up to as high as 33% that Gunnison employs. So we did do some benchmarking with other cities. So that's the 25%. We chose expenditures because typically and often you would see a percentage of revenues or expenditures as the base for this amount. And you would want to choose the more stable of those two. And in our case, the revenues, because they're sales tax oriented, there's more stability with the expenditures, and that was the reason for choosing expenditures instead of revenues for the base. So what are the acceptable uses? In this recommendation from SALT-FAB, it would be able to be used only for these three items, and that is a severe economic downturn, infrastructure failures, or natural disasters. And it further defines the severe economic downturn as if our revenues drop by 2%, or if it exceeds a drop of 2%. And then the replenishment of those reserves, depending on how far the revenues have dropped, it outlines how we would recover that. So, again, this is recommended by SaltFab, to do the 25% immediately and not do a buildup over time. And the investment of these funds, at this moment in time, it would currently be with the investment pool, as all of our investments are in the city. We don't have anything separate for this particular purpose. However, I do want to mention that another one of our financial policies that's on deck to be dealt with is the investment policy and putting in place a more robust investment program. So that may change down the line. Okay. So to give a little more detail on the general fund reserve, I'm going to give just a very brief little governmental accounting lesson. So the different classifications of fund balance are really rooted in the governmental accounting principles, and it breaks them into these different categories. Basically the degree of spendability. So our non-spendable are things like inventory, not at all liquid, and then restrictions that are legally restricted by an outside organization. Committed is technically unrestricted because it can be undone, but what classifies a commitment is something that the city council itself imposes upon itself by resolution, by legal action. And then assigned is more of an earmark. It's not a formal resolution, it's not a formal action, but it is still kind of a set aside by the council. And then the unassigned is available for any purpose to be used, deployed in any way that the council sees fit. Okay, this chart, it's a little bit confusing, but what I'm trying to portray here is what, over time, what is our actual fund balance and what represents 25% of the budgeted expenditures compared to the fund balances. So by looking at the yellow bar there, the 25% of the budgeted expenditures, we want to remove or the designations. So anything that's not unassigned. So the non-spendable, restricted, committed, and assigned. We remove those out to get down to what's our truly unassigned and available fund balance. And we want the reserve amount to be an amount that the unassigned would cover. So if we look at, I know I didn't explain that very well, but this 25% is inclusive of all of these other items. So really what we're looking at is the unassigned, what's left of the unassigned, and we want to determine if the fund balance will fit inside of this unassigned. That's the goal. We don't want to go into a negative unassigned because of a reserve policy. So this last row here represents over time, if we had employed this 25% reserve, what would be left over and available for redeployment or opportunities or contingencies if something just clearly unexpected or arose, or opportunities. So my point here is if we had this 25% rule in place over the last few years, we actually would not have met that amount in our fund balance until 2020. Well, 2019 we would have had a little bit, but because 2020 ended up to be a better year in terms of the operations, we're looking at about a $4.5 million net income for that. Then for that year, it looks fine for this 25%, but prior years it would have been a deficit situation for that. So that's the general fund reserve policy. Do we have any questions that I can answer on that before moving on to the next policy?
So I will probably be removing this from the consent agenda item, and I would rather ask the questions then so that the answers to the questions are what we vote on specifically. I don't know if other councilors have questions right now.
I have some questions, but I'll wait until you're done with this presentation, Cynthia.
Okay, certainly. All right. So much less complicated is the operating budget policy. So the budget document itself, or the budget process, is one of the most important processes and public documents that any city, and specifically the city of Durango, produces. So this policy puts into place a lot of criteria so that we have the best policy going forward for creating the operating budget. So it has these 9 or so elements, and that is the scope, really just saying that it applies to all operating funds, and that it's an annual versus every 2-year document. And the basis of budgeting is a modified accrual. So we have several bases of accounting, and the modified accrual is what brings us closest to a cash basis without being a cash basis, which really is what we use for the budgeting anyway. It removes out some of those full accrual entries that you would see for our financial statements, things like depreciation and some pension liabilities and whatnot that don't really affect the inflows and the outflows necessarily. So this policy specifies the basis of budgeting to be a modified accrual. And for the cost allocation, the policy is suggesting that we do a full cost allocation process for all the funds, and that study be prepared every 3 years, so that we're staying current with what those allocations would be. Another element is the level of control, and what that means is at what level can budget and adjustments be made without the city council approval. And we're recommending that be at the department level inside of a fund. So for instance, the finance department and the general fund would have the ability to move things around ourselves, but if we went outside of that department in that fund, it would require city council approval. And that's really rooted in the fact that that's the level at which city council approves the budget. As we're going through the budget, and it's not a line item level, it's really at the department level. So we want to stay within that. If we're going to change that up, we need the council approval because they approved it at that level. And the balanced budget, we're suggesting that it be structurally balanced, which means that the one-time revenues be paired with one-time expenses, and ongoing revenues be paired with ongoing expenses. That's what we consider structurally balanced. The budget form is really the budget book. How do we present the budget? And one item that came up that I think we would like to include in that is a history of the fund balance. We do ask for history of the revenues and expenditures, but it's not real clear the fund balance over time. And so we would ask to include that piece as well. And another element here is the long-term financial forecasts. We're going to look at the major revenues and expenditures forecasts extending 10 years, and that gets updated and refreshed annually, but always at that 10-year look. That's also going to play into the next policy that we'll talk about, which really gets into the meat of the forecasting. And then lastly, we're looking at including performance measures. Now, the document recommends both efficiency and output type of measures, and customer surveys as well. So what this policy really is saying is that we want to include performance measures. It's not as specific to say exactly which measures, but that we want to include performance measures as part of this document. So, any questions on the operating budget policy?
I'll be pulling this one from the agenda also. So it would probably be best for council to hold their questions on these last two until we have that conversation.
Okay, certain.
But that's all I'm going to be pulling. I'm not going to pull the next one, but somebody else might.
Okay, very well. So the third and final policy before you tonight is the long-term planning and forecasting policy. And this really speaks to the viability and sustainability. It's taking that longer term look and how are we going to do that from a policy standpoint. So it helps to stabilize, when you can look into the future and see what you think is going to happen, it can help stabilize tax revenues and services over those multiple years. And it helps to identify potential imbalances. So if we can look down the road and say, oh, look, we have this cliff coming up in year 5, what do we do now to react accordingly to fix that problem? So it's a little bit of a crystal ball in some cases, but that's the intent here, really. So the policy in front of you speaks to the length of those forecasts, which will be 10 years, and that we update that annually. So it's a rolling 10 years. We're always looking ahead 10 years. Want also to mention that we have already have a first draft of many of these. We've got the water fund, sewer fund, airport, transit, already well on our way to having our 10-year forecast finalized. So I'm very happy to mention that as we're working through this. And then the assumptions need to be specified and reflected in these forecasts, and things need to be tied back to the strategic plan, as always. And then the goal is to be balanced for at least for the 10 years and make sure that we're staying on track. Okay, that's all I had for this, but I know we'll be getting questions through the specific policies on the agenda.
I'm going to just ask a couple of questions, Cynthia.
Sure.
And I hope you don't mind, Ms. Baxter, or Mayor Baxter. I had sent some questions before, and I want to just follow up on this. And since it's a little bit more in the general, and maybe also to give me a better understanding, and I apologize if it's stupid questions. So first of all, I understand it's 25% on the general fund is a relatively standard percentage, and it's needed for our credit rating. That's correct, yeah?
That is an important piece of having a credit rating. Right now, we don't have a bond rating because we don't have any of those kinds of bonds out. The last one we just paid off a couple of years ago. And then when those get paid off and they're not in the marketplace anymore, the rating agencies pull back that rating because it's really irrelevant because there's no more debt related to it. If we were to go for more bonding for whatever reason, we would have to obtain a bond rating through the rating agencies. And yes, this is part of what they look for is the reserve. If the bonds are tied to the general fund.
Okay. Well, it was one of the things I thought it was primarily for the credit rating. And anyway, I'll just move on. I think the current percentage is 29%, so that's about 12 million based on the adopted city budget. Now, if I look at the city in total, and I know I cannot do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if I take all the funds, the general fund, the special revenue fund, the internal revenue fund, enterprise funds, capital funds, project funds, it looks like we had 65 million in cash in 2019, 65 in 2020, and an expected 57 million for 2021. These are funds, monies, cash, in funds that are sitting around. Those percentages, those proportions seem very high to me for a city that has revenues and expenditures of 100 to 110 million. So it's about 60%. And I do understand a large portion is in enterprise funds for water and airport, followed by the general fund and the SUR fund. Now, I'm a little bit concerned of the benefit of having such a high amount because it costs money to have that money, or someone has paid for it. And the reserve to have, according to the general fund percentage and the table you showed earlier, shows only a maximum drawdown of 10% if revenue drops 15%, which would still leave 15% in that reserve. And that's only the general reserve. Yeah? So that would be 12 million, so that equals 7.5 million. So I basically have 3 questions. The first one, and this, I hope, I'm not too familiar on these things, but is there a way to apply or include the balances of other funds to qualify for our credit rating, if that's ever needed, as well as to have the adequate funds in case it is needed in those specific scenarios. And the latter is important, I think, because we have a lot of money available in, for example, the water and sewer fund that would also allow us to address, I guess, significant events. I'm going to ask 3 questions. Maybe I'll start with the first one, if you have a chance to look and answer that.
So the first question on could we draw on other funds for a credit rating? So it really kind of depends on what the bonding is for. It would have an impact when they look at the overall financial health of the whole city. But when it comes to the reserve, it's really fund specific. So if we're looking at, say, enterprise funds, if we're looking for a water or sewer loan, you know, they're more concerned about the self-sustainability of that fund, the water or sewer fund. And it would not be desirable to draw from the general fund for that purpose. They want it to be self-sustaining, and often they'll have bond covenants, so rules in the agreements that say you have to have certain coverage ratios. Your revenues have to exceed your expenses by a certain amount. So they're very specific in looking at that fund and not the city as a whole. So conversely, if you're looking at something in the general fund, whether it's a sales tax type of or property tax driven piece, they're not really all that concerned about what's happening over in the enterprise funds, because what you're pledging is the full faith and credit of the general fund. So I would say to a small extent, yeah, they want to make sure that the city and as a whole is financially healthy. But when they're looking at repayment pieces, they're looking for more specific funds for that. So I don't know that we could draw from another fund in order to meet our reserves in a different fund.
Well, I don't mean drawing. I just say present it to them that we have these funds and these amounts, because we end up with 60%. Do you not believe that's a very high percentage to have sitting around in funds at low return, relatively speaking? Or am I
think that it's a good thing that we're looking at fund balances, because I think that we could bring them, you know, in line better, and this is the first step in doing that. We will be doing the same kind of reserve exercise for the other fund types.
Okay.
And the 25% amount is what came out of SaltFab.
Yep, I understand, and I don't.
That is not necessarily, you know, I think that's pretty ambitious to do that right out of the gate without doing a kind of a build up into that. But that was their recommendation, and council certainly has the ability to modify these policies as they see fit. This is the recommendation, but that does not mean it has to be approved as written.
I appreciate that. I think it's more phasing out certain higher volume ones or reducing it to more realistic numbers and making sure that overall we have that reserve in the general fund or access to it in case of serious issues. The second point is more a point. This is, I think we'll have to bring this up, but we speak of affordability, cost of living in Durango, but taxpayers are paying into some of those funds with high fees. And to address the cost of living in Durango, maybe we should consider reducing some of those fees and reassessing the amounts that have been accumulated in some of those funds where, the water fund is an example. But anyway, this is something that will come in the future, I think. The third thing is the use and transfer of funds, which was voiced by others. And does the proposed policy comply with the charter in that funds are allocated to the department and the control mechanisms for intra-departmental transfers or budget exceedances for that matter? So does it strictly comply? And it's probably a question you have seen because it was an email.
So I'm going to ask Devin to chime in on that, since she prepared the budget last time around, and what mechanisms they used in that process to ensure compliance with the charter or code.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Good evening, Council. Just to make sure I understand the question. So Councilor Bossman, you are wondering how is a fund balance tapped into? Is that the question?
Well, first, I think there was, actually, did I have it on speaker? Yes, I do. I have to check. If first of all, if the proposed policy complies with the charter, and that applies to if the funds are allocated to the department or the control mechanism for intra-departmental transfers and budget exceedances to control there. So I guess the bottom line is, does it comply with the charter? And if you have more information on how that control system works, that would be great.
Okay. I would say that the fund balance policy does comply with the charter in that the charter doesn't necessarily mention fund balance. The city manager does have the ability to transfer within a fund. However, within the CIP policy that we put forth at the previous council meeting, we have made that change now to where council should be the approver of the balance policies changes. So while the language is in the charter doesn't specifically discuss the fund balances, it's really up to city council to make those changes about when we should utilize fund balance. Now, Colorado state budget law will say that council appropriates a budget, and from there, it's at a fund level, and it's at really in ours a department specific level. And from there, anytime you were to exceed that, a department should come back to city council for approval. So state of Colorado says, here's how that works. And so we do follow that procedure when it comes to state budget law, that you cannot exceed your budget without coming to council and asking for an additional appropriation.
Okay. For me, I appreciate that response. And also Cynthia, you, and I'll let Kim address the rest during the ordinance.
Thank you. Any other questions by council?
You know, I just wanted to jump in and give a huge thanks to Cynthia and to Devin. And Cynthia, you've been on board 6 months now, and yes, you're already addressing some policies that we haven't had in place for years. So I appreciate you tackling it and taking it on. And I know that, you know, it's a process. We will continue to look at ways that we can do things better and to improve. But just a huge thanks to the two of you for the work the past 6 months and the past year. Thank you.
And I'll just add to that, huge thank you to the SALT FAB committee working with Cynthia. They did a really great job, and they've worked hard. And just to reiterate, as we'll get into it when we talk about it more after we pull it from the consent agenda. But you know, these are recommendations that they made that they were suggesting, and they said it so many times in the meetings. This is just what this is a high level policy, and council can at any point at any year make decisions to deviate from that policy if and when needed for various reasons. It's their recommendation. It's a high level policy to strive for. So I just wanted to mention that as well and thank them too.
Anything else, council or staff? No. Thank you very much, Cynthia. Much appreciated. And then we'll move on to the review of the consent agenda, item 6. The consent agenda is intended to allow the city council by a single motion to approve matters that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests an item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered under agenda item 8, sorry. May we have a reading of the consent agenda, please?
Items 6.1 through 6.3 are approval of minutes. 6.1 is approval of minutes from the May 12th City Council special study session. 6.2 is approval of minutes from the May 11th City Council study session. 6.3 is approval of minutes from the May 17th City Council special study session. Item 6.4 is a discussion and possible action regarding approval of the general fund reserve policy. Item 6.5 is discussion and possible action regarding approval of the operating budget policy. Item 6.6 is discussion and possible action regarding a resolution amending Resolution R 2020-42, consenting to and supporting a long-term lease, easements, and other related agreements between Port Louis College and Animas High School. Item 6.7 is discussion and possible action concerning a resolution authorizing an additional appropriation to the general fund for landscaping in the medians between 12th and 14th Street on Camino del Rio. Item 6.8 is discussion and possible action concerning a resolution authorizing an additional appropriation to the general fund to support the Durango Botanic Gardens. Item 6.9 is discussion and possible action regarding approval of the long-term financial planning policy. Item 6.10 is discussion and possible action regarding the approval of electric vehicle fast charging fees. Item 6.11 is a request for a public hearing to consider the South Fork Crater Lot 5 preliminary plan review. Item 6.12 is a request for a public hearing to consider the Boxcar Landing conceptual plan review. Item 6.13 is a request for a public hearing to consider the Faring Way planned development amendment. And 6.14 is a request for a public hearing to consider the Manna Soup Kitchen easement at 1100 Elvina del Sol. All of the public hearings would be held on June 15th, 2021.
Thank you very much, Faye. Are there any items that any councilors would like to remove? Okay, then I would like to remove 6.4, discussion and possible action regarding approval of general fund reserve policy, and 6.5, discussion and possible action regarding approval of the operating budget policy. Is there a motion for approving the items remaining on the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda with the 2 items you've listed removed.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Faye, may we have a vote, please?
Councilor Youssef?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councilor Bosman?
Yes.
Councilor Buell?
Yes.
And Mayor Baxter?
Yes. So then we'll move on to item 8, which is remove consent agenda items. The reason why I asked for 6.4 to be removed was I think it's a little bit unclear in the general fund reserve policy which items in the reserve this policy applies to. And so when I sent Cynthia an email, her response was that it included all designations of the fund balance. So it included the Tabor 3% reserve requirement and any other committed or assigned portions of the fund balance. The only portion not included in the 25 reserve is the unassigned fund balance. But as we just learned, that would be count toward that 25%, I believe, if your chart showed us that. And then the balance that we have in there for an opportunity reserve at this point would not be included in that 25%. And I really think that the policy should be very clear on what's included and not included. Otherwise, we're going to have issues down the line about what is and what isn't, I'm concerned.
Okay, so yeah, we can certainly clarify that.
That would be wonderful. Is there any, Melissa, did you have a?
No, sorry,
your hand was up and I was like, ooh. Yes.
Mayor, you raised a really good point there, and it actually made me think about with the Tabor, we even have the option to use an asset rather than real cash as the collateral, if you will, which would imply we had even less money available if we were using an asset, and if we were including that. It's not, it's money that we could use, we could sell if we had to, but it's not cash on hand.
So the actual cash available would be less if we made that choice to swap out the asset, yes. So I just think there needs to be some refinement done in this to be a little bit more specific. I don't know if we need to have a motion to do so, or we just don't have a motion to accept it and we allow Cynthia to work on it a little bit more and come back to us. I would really not like to see a discussion about this in the future where we weren't certain what we were intending. So, does that work for council?
I would just say that we've come this far and refining it and getting the clarity. I would support that.
It would seem to be a pretty easy add, Cynthia, and could come back potentially in a future consent agenda item on the 15th maybe, unless you need it sooner. So that would probably be okay, wouldn't it? Because it's just basically adding some definitions of exactly what we're talking about, which is for clarity's sake. And
we're not changing anything. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Take that as a yes.
I think that works.
Yes, that works.
Okay, thank you. So on to 6.5, which is the operating budget policy. There was just, there were two things, actually, two comments I wanted to make. One was on the level of control, which shall be at the fund and department level, which is as restrictive as the charter. So in that sense, it meets the charter's requirements. I just wanted to be really clear about that because I just now went back and read the charter again just to make sure. And then the other one is in the budget form and information, which you mentioned in the reporting, that we would also know what the fund balances had been over time and current, so we could see the trends and what the impacts were. And you said you would be willing to include that, I think, in your presentation. So
yes, absolutely.
Any other comments, councilors? All right, then that one will take the same course as the previous one.
Bring that one back.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, so on to our public hearings. So 9.1, we have legislative and policy related hearings. We have no items. 9.2, quasi judicial hearings. We have 9.2.1, a public hearing to consider the Vero Chapman Hill easement at 500 Florida Road. I think we probably have a staff person for this.
Good evening, councilors. I'm standing in for Leah tonight. And all things considered, I'll try to get through this pretty quickly for you. There's no formal slideshow or anything. As you know, in order to provide easements across city property, we need to have an ordinance and a public hearing to do so. In this particular case, we have Vero Fiber Networks requesting an easement down Chapman Hill from Rim Drive down to Florida Road. It's approximately 1,015 linear feet by 10 feet wide. Staff has worked with the Parks and Rec Department as well as the IS Department to establish the documents you have before you in order to move this process forward. It's essentially to add better fiber capabilities in the community. So the granting of this easement to Vero will meet the comprehensive plan as well as the strategic plan for infrastructure improvements. And the staff recommendation is to conduct a public hearing tonight to consider public testimony and comment, and thereafter direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance for first reading at the next regularly scheduled city council meeting, authorizing the granting of an easement to Vero Fiber Networks as described in the attached documents to your staff report. Unless there's questions, I would pass it to Mayor Baxter to open the meeting or public hearing.
Any questions, council? Okay, well then I will open the public hearing. Do we have an applicant who wants to speak to this?
I wish I could tell you I know that. I don't believe there is anyone here though.
Okay, do we have any public comment? Let's see if we have any attendees raising their hands. I don't see any.
Not yet.
Okay. All right, given that there are no raised hands, I will close the public meeting, public comment part, hearing part, and open it up to the council for questions. Any questions, council? No? Okay, then do we have a motion? Anyone would like to make a motion on this item?
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
If you want, I can read something out here.
Go for it. You're on mute though, Olivier. Uh-oh. Did I just freeze up or are you all frozen?
Okay, I think I got it. We're at, okay. Sorry, I don't have my two screens, so I'm a little off. Where is the recommendation by motion? Okay, I'll move to conduct a public hearing to consider public test, is that it? All right. Public testimony and comment, and thereafter direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance for first reading at the next regular scheduled city council meeting authorizing the granting of an easement for Vero Fiber Networks as described in the attached documentation.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? And I'll just mention that the second half of that was all you needed, but thank you, you got it done, awesome.
As long as it's done.
Faye, may we have a vote, please?
Councillor Youssef,
Yes.
Councillor Beal,
Yes.
Councillor Bosman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nosworthy,
Yes.
and Mayor Baxter.
Yes, thank you. And now we move on to item 11, introduction of ordinances. 11.1, an ordinance amending chapter 27 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Durango, Land Use and Development Code, by the amendment of portions of tables and sections of 2-1-3-6 and 2-2-3-12 of the code governing vehicle and recreational sales and rentals and declaring an effective date. Do we have a staff report on this?
Yes, this item was subject to public hearing at the most recent prior city council meeting. This item does change the code to allow sales and rental of autos and RVs in the light industrial zone. The ordinance is presented for your consideration tonight.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there any questions by council or would someone like to make a motion?
I don't see a motion, but a motion to approve the recommended changes to the land use code.
Yeah, and I should have said this is ordinance 2021-12. I'm sorry I neglected to do that.
Of ordinance 2020-12.
2021-. Okay, great. You have a second?
I'll second.
Wonderful. Any discussion? Faye, may we have a vote?
Councillor Youssef,
Yes.
Councillor Bosman,
Yes.
Councillor Buell,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nosworthy,
Yes.
and Mayor Baxter.
Yes. So on to 11.2, which is an ordinance vacating and abandoning a portion of the right-of-way adjacent to property at 301 West 32nd Street and declaring an effective date. And Dirk, I'm guessing this would be 2021-13?
That's right. This item was also at council, this prior meeting for hearing. This is vacating 1,100 square foot piece of the right of way on to alleviate an encroachment.
Yes.
Mayor
Pro Tem Nosworthy,
Yes.
and Mayor Baxter.
Yes. I think we just got a reverb recording. Okay, go ahead, Dirk, sorry.
I was saying that this ordinance is drafted to vacate a 1,100 square foot part of the right of way to alleviate an encroachment of a residence and residential property. So again, this is 2021-13.
Any questions from council? Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve this ordinance. Which was the number again? I'm sorry.
2113.
2113.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Faye, may we have a vote, please?
Counselor Youssef,
Yes.
Counselor Bosman's,
Yes.
Counselor Buell,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Nosworthy,
Yes.
and Mayor Baxter.
Yes. All right, on to item 12, administrative. 12.1, discussion and possible action concerning a request by Wapata County Homes Fund for city funding assistance. Jose, this one is yours, yes? And welcome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the council allowing me the time to go see my son's graduation. So he is now on his way to being a freshman in high school, and I cannot believe I have a high school aged son. So a whole lot of feels going on right there for sure. But with that, I'll introduce Kevin Hall, our Managing Director of Community Development, to introduce this item and present to the City Council. Kevin?
Good evening, Council. It seemed like just a couple of days ago when we first brought this item forward on May 18th. And as you will recall, it was a request from Homes Fund for funding assistance that they would utilize to assist the acquisition of Animas View Drive Mobile Home Park. You heard a number of impassioned requests earlier this evening, public comment about support for the project. And when we last left this conversation on the 18th, I think there was a lot of conversation about what a loan looked like for this project. And I would say that when the first proposal came forward from Homes Fund, it was approximately early May, and it was just forwarded on to council. When the staff report came the week prior to the 18th, it read a little bit differently in terms of what staff was doing to kind of create a path forward, if you will, to allow this to occur. And the staff report spoke to use of the fair share fees in lieu that we collect that currently only go to Homes Fund for mortgage assistance purposes. The staff report further talked about our other housing funds as probably not being the appropriate source of funds if there's interest in doing this. So we're really honed in on the fees in lieu, and I would say that what the proposal represents is something that is consistent with the strategic plan. It's consistent with our housing plan, and I'll just say that, you know, with City Manager Madrigal joining us last year, I think we've really tried to focus our staff on getting this to a place where there's an avenue forward to say yes to things like this. And I would suggest that what we have before you is that opportunity to say yes if you choose to do so. One item I think we need to spend a couple minutes differentiating is this discussion of a loan versus other ways to provide this funding. And you may recall or know that there's often every year there's community support funding given to a number of organizations, and that particularly I'm thinking about United Way, where they receive I'll call it a block grant, and they have to utilize the funds in a general manner consistent with what the city's understanding is, but the city doesn't really hone in on the details of how they put that money to use. So what we've done with Homes Fund over the last several weeks, over the last month, is really come to a place where, based on our review of the fair share ordinance and our fund balances for fees in lieu, we have the ability, and we feel it's appropriate to use the fees in lieu for this purpose if you so choose to. And it isn't about a loan, it would be about the city passing through dollars to Homes Fund maybe a little sooner than we would have otherwise. Because since the dollars go to Homes Fund under any circumstances, the way we set up their professional services agreement, last year we modified it a little bit so that they would only ask for funds when they needed it for loan or for mortgage assistance loans. And otherwise the city would hold the funds in abeyance until they needed it. Well, so in this case, what we're what we envision is we have a fund balance. Some of it's already with Homes Fund, some is in the city's coffers, where we would just essentially forward them additional revenue and give them a one-time expanded use of the fees in lieu for them to work with the Animas View Mobile Home Park on, in this case, I think the focus is on this grant. I'm sorry, on this loan. They certainly could choose to do it in a different manner, but I think for the purposes of council, the idea would be we're doing forgive me, I don't recall who said it, but someone said it, a mission-driven grant as an option, rather than focusing in on the city loaning dollars to somebody, which gets very complicated very fast. Whereas if we do a mission-driven grant to Homes Fund, and they have to use it within the confines of the fair share ordinance and within in the professional services agreement, we'll have to do if we want to move forward in this manner, we can put together a fairly straightforward amendment to to the professional services agreement that indicates that these dollars would be used to serve residents under the 125 AMI, which is well within the fair share ordinance, recognizing that the dollars probably wouldn't be deployed for mortgage assistance to the tune of $500,000 for a number of years. I believe Executive Director Bloomquist Palmer said it would take at least 5 years to deploy these dollars. In this case, we would forward what is essentially $305,000 that we already hold in the fund balance to match with some of the dollars we already passed through to them that they're not using for mortgage assistance, to make that $500,000 grant for the purposes that they would define as assisting the mobile home park. And I know when we talked last time, there was a lot of talk about a loan. So there's also a lot of talk about bankers and what their thoughts were on this. And I do know that Lisa, who's here tonight, along with Sean Candelaria, who's a member of their board, and is also with Four Corners Community Bank. He's the president of the local market. In fact, Tom could bring them in because I think they're going to want to either answer questions or maybe share some thoughts with you on this. But I talked to Sean at length last week, and I also talked to Ken Curtis. And I would say both of them, from a big picture standpoint, from the approach of this mission-driven grant, they felt it was very appropriate use of the funds, all things considered. And Kent indicated he was supportive of that approach. He said, if you want to get into the loan discussion, there's certainly a lot you can talk about. He also said, though, as a CDFI that he's part of, that his CDFI could easily come in 10 years and backfill any gap there might be between the value of the property and the value of the loan as it stands when it becomes a balloon. And that he felt that any number of CDFIs could do a similar thing to help support the refinance after 10 years, because I know that was a big part of the discussion. But in this particular case, what the city could do is mission-driven grant to Homes Fund, and then it's up to Homes Fund and their board of directors to utilize those funds that are appropriate based on the rules that they have established within the confines of the agreements we have with them. And then that takes us out of the conversation of what the loan looks like and how it benefits the residents. My sense is that what is being asked absolutely meets the intent of the strategic plan. We have 116 units that are essentially primarily under 125 AMI and maybe all under 125 AMI. It meets strategic plan, the housing plan, which is part of our comprehensive plan. And given the white hot conversation about affordable, attainable workforce housing right now, this is an opportunity to move forward with that sort of thing. So with that, I will turn it over to the council for any questions of me, or if Lisa wanted to share a few words on the memo she attached to the most recent staff report.
I think it would be great to hear from Lisa before we do council questions.
Thank you very much, Council, and thank you very much, Kevin. And also thank you very much to all of the residents who spoke earlier, and hopefully some of you are still on the meeting. As you can tell, people really love this community and they're very passionate about it, and they very much want to stay in not only Animas View, but in Durango, and really staying where they are is their opportunity to stay in Durango. I think that there was some confusion that has been cleared up as to the source of funds and how exactly this would be administered and how and the city's role versus Homes Fund's role. I think that Kevin really clarified a lot of those things that I think were confusing 2 weeks ago. So certainly I apologize that it wasn't clear when it was brought to you 2 weeks ago, but I think that the discussion 2 weeks ago did clarify a lot of things. So, you know, this is really an opportunity for the city to help out 116 households, many of whom are low income, many of whom are very low income. And, you know, for better or for worse, we don't get that opportunity when we're working with homeownership mortgage assistance funds that often to help out people who are, you know, under 50% of area median income. So I really do see this as a very mission-oriented opportunity for the city and for Homes Fund. It's a very historic opportunity, and I'm really happy to be part of it, as Homes Fund is going to be part of it regardless of the city's decision. You know, I feel like I could say more. If you don't mind, can I just ask that maybe Andy Cadlick be let in as well? I know that he is on the call, and he is with Thistle Communities, and he answered some questions very well last time, and will probably be able to answer questions this time. So I think that most of what I have to say is in the materials, which I believe that you all have read. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Lisa. Andy, is there something you would like to say also?
Thanks so much, Mayor Baxter. And thank you, Lisa, for all your support throughout this process. I don't think, you know, at this point, there's anything I can say to the, you know, dozen or more public comments that started the city council meeting. I feel like it's pretty clear that there's a lot of passion for this project. And I'm just really grateful to have the opportunity to work in Durango and work with such great staff, as well as great residents in the Animas View Park. So I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Thank you. And you reminded me, I also want to make a comment that although they weren't spoken into public comment, there were many, many letters that we received and emails today supporting this concept. So council, do you have questions?
I have a comment, but not questions. So I'll wait and see if there's any other questions.
Okay, well, let's do comments.
All right. Well, first of all, a huge thank you. Thank you to Kevin for trying to find a way to get to yes and becoming customer service oriented. I think that's a wonderful change in culture in some ways. I also think this is a historic opportunity and to create a real win-win for the community in Animas View Mobile Home Park and for the city. It helps us achieve our goals of working on housing. We impact 116 families or people living in homes in this community. And it allows us to demonstrate our willingness to go out there and provide mission-driven grants, which I think we do, as you said earlier, with things like the community fund. So I am thrilled to have all the information that's come back. And I appreciate all the work that's done. And Lisa, let me also say, you know, in the past, we have transferred funds to you and trusted your board and you and your staff to make appropriate decisions. And I don't see this as any different this time around either. So in my opinion, so thank you.
Any other comments, councilors?
Shall I ask some questions? First, I want to thank all the people that have spoken up, and I understand all the concerns. Affordable housing is very important, and it's a top priority. But there is misunderstandings that I do wish to clarify. And I'll be the bad guy, I guess, pointing these things out for making at least educated decisions. First of all, all the information provided indicates that the purchase will proceed regardless of the potential interest-free loan by the city. So this potential city loan has no impact on whether this proceeds or not, and the addition or not of affordable housing. I think that's important to note because everybody, including everybody on the council and during all the campaigns, is very proactive in affordable housing. So we're all on the same line, and this city loan will not make a difference. This discussion and request is also not a question if affordable housing will be created, as it will proceed. It's also not about where the money comes from. And I also agree, I want to specifically mention this, that the term building wealth used before is not appropriate, especially based on the additional data that was provided. The key is affordable housing. Now, I have quite a few things here to say, so I hope you're okay with that. A loan has a cost to taxpayers, all taxpayers. So a $500,000 amount, if you have an interest fee or you have a return on your investment, say 4%, it means the city loses $20,000 every year for 10 years. So $200,000. And sure, you can argue that a normal return is 1 or 2%, but you can also argue that you have this mortgage at 4.4%, you have the 9R bonds at 4.2%, you have the higher interest bonds or debt that the city has that might be in the same order of magnitude. So I think 4% is a realistic number, which if something goes wrong, you also add the loss of the whole $500,000 could mean a loss of $700,000. But I do want to explain a little bit about what has been presented, because I'm actually quite disappointed in what I consider misleading and incorrect or incomplete information provided by the Homes Fund. And I believe that the residents of this Hobo Park, as well as other concerned people that have voiced their opinions, should be equally disappointed. And I'll give you some details because I think it needs to be clear for the record. The calculations on page 62, I think it is from the 64 pages here, compare the savings between a conventional 30-year loan in the full amount with the combination of loans from the Homes Fund and the city loan that are $500,000 each. Now, that shows a saving for the first 10 years of $380 a year per residence, and then an increase for $110 per year per residence. And then it says that the savings for the first 20 years is $270. But if you add those up and divide it by 2 or 20 years, it's not 270, it's 135 years. $135 a year savings. And in addition, the loan is not 20 years, it's 30 years. So there's another 10 years where you have extra costs of $110 a year for those years 20 to 30. So the actual saving using the Homes Fund numbers is $53 a year, which is, just so if anybody wants to calculate, the first 10 years you save $380 a year, and the next 20 years you pay $110 a year more. So if you average it out, it's 53. And in the end, it really doesn't matter. If it's 53, my initial calculation 2 weeks ago was $39 because there's some costs that are not included in these options. If I continue, the $381 for the first 10 years is also misleading because it is a savings presented by Homes Fund of the additional, of a comparison between the 30-year mortgage for the full amount with a 10-year interest-free loan plus the Homes Fund loan. But that is not the option or the discussion here. The discussion is the comparison between either the city interest-free loan applies or does not apply. And that extra savings is not $380 either for the first 10 years. It is significantly less. But it doesn't, even that doesn't matter. It is some financial support for all the residents in that community in that mobile home park. So 81% of the residents are below 80% of the AMI. That also means that 20% is not. So do you want to give money to the people that don't need it, or you can also give people upfront a certain benefit, or you could give the actual people with low income that are struggling and making ends meet. They need those people specifically supporting financially. And I think that is where other programs, existing programs, and I think it was mentioned by someone on the comments, are in existence. And that would be mortgage or rental assistance programs. And yes, they might need some tweaking, so we make sure it includes this specific category. Now, I'm sorry that many of the residents and people that have voiced their concerns did not get the complete information. To me, that is a problem. The purchase will proceed regardless of the city law. I think it is important for us to be fair to everybody. You can say, oh, we do a mission or a grant. That's not the question. The question is we're helping people afford to live somewhere, and especially those who are struggling, help them financially. Not everybody under the sun, not the people that don't need it, but specifically those people. There is programs for it. And I asked also the city manager to provide an update on the number of housing units being constructed, etc., and in early and later stages of development. That is an equal important part of getting housing on the market. But for this specific project, there is no difference. The only difference is, are you willing to make a financial donation to the residents? And the actual number of that donation is significantly less than what is presented. I think that's my point, and I'll leave it up to you guys. If you have any questions on why I say these numbers, or if you want me to calculate it again, it's very easy using the same report as provided by Homefront. I'll leave it at that.
Any other comments or questions, councilors?
Yes, I'll jump in. I think it was very helpful that Kevin reworded and phrased what he did, and we got the information that we did. I would suggest that in the future, I know Lisa, in the last council meeting, you said you had weeks, I think, looking at this, and we had days. Maybe if we're working as a city with the Homes Fund on something new like this and creative, which I love, that when you get the information, our staff can get the information and we can kind of work together, so that way it's not, coming to us last minute and then having to come back to us again to make a decision, and it can be a little bit more efficient. I love the mission-driven grant idea. I think it is, instead of worrying about like how they're getting the loan or what they're getting the loan for, like that's not really what we're here for. It is more $500,000 is the Homes Fund money per our fair share agreement. And all we're doing is saying that we want it to be allocated to loan to mobile home parks too, instead of just mortgage assistance, which I think it's great. I think we can benefit 116 homes. Originally, when it's the loan, you're talking about 75% AMI is typically your mark for people, the average that people get the loans. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, well, that's like $100,000 to people that are above the AMI. But if you're looking at it as a grant, that's not really the issue. It's more, we're preserving this park. I would like to also, maybe we'll bring up to council other ideas to preserve this as a mobile home park and look at other, other creative ways. Can we come up with a new land use code that we give to mobile home parks so they can't be bought up by, developers in the future if this happens again, and, change that these stay, affordable housing forever. And so I think that there's other creative things we can do to help keep pushing this in the right direction. But I do appreciate, the clarification and the work that Kevin put into this to make it that mission-driven grant and come forward like that. So thank you, Kevin, and staff for your work, and Lisa.
Councilor Youssef, I see your mute is off. Do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. Great points by the councilors, and I did appreciate Kevin's introduction. Thank you, Kevin. And thank you also for, trying to be creative. And I really appreciated Councillor Buell's idea of, let's keep moving forward on these ideas. If this is our opportunity to promote affordable housing, then let's continue this creative thought process going forward. But what I would suggest for this is that, I appreciate the clarification that this is not a loan. And I think that is critically important information. The city of Durango is not loaning to this mobile home park, but these are homes funds, technically through our fair share ordinance. And what I would ask is that we were placed in a very difficult situation as a council by the way it was brought forward to us. And I think that really what would be easier is if we could be making a high-level policy decision. We're a policy-making board and body that would just simply allow the Homes Fund to make these types of decisions going forward, so that going forward, these decisions don't come to City Council. That the Homes Fund then makes mortgage, does mortgage assistance, and also in areas where it's able to provide lending to promote and or maintain or sustain affordable housing, and define it as appropriate. But it seems like it should be a policy, so that we don't face this again in the future. And we then therefore wouldn't face the issue of precedent setting here, because it would go through Homes Fund, not the city. And so I just wanted to throw that out there as consideration for going forward. I feel like I'd like to see this not happen again.
Are you complete with that one?
Yes.
Thank you. So I also want to say thank you to everyone, and I love the imagination that's been, and the passion that's been used to get this far in this program. And it's very obvious that the community and the mobile home park has come together as a real community. And I think that this will be an ongoing process for them to maintain that community thought. So I want to say both to, and I don't remember which counselor said things, so I apologize. But I do also agree that this money that we're talking about is money that would go to Homes Fund. And under our contract, Homes Fund would be using that money to do what they think is the most effective way of preserving affordable and attainable housing, and ensuring that people who can stay in that housing. And I also think that Homes Fund has other funds that they use that are not part of the city funds, and they do this kind of thing. They loan money, they help support this. They are experts in their field. And if we don't agree with that, then that's a different choice. But I do believe we've asked them to be experts, and they are experts, and these are the kind of decisions that they get to make. And I really appreciate that, and the job that they're doing and that Lisa is doing. I do want to mention that one of the things that keeps being brought up is it sounds like there's going to be a reduction in people's lot rents, and that's not true. Their lot rent is $730 a month right now, and no matter what, it will go up. This is only to help reduce that rise in rents. It does not actually decrease the current rent they're paying. So we have to look at the people who have low incomes below 30% AMI, below 60% AMI, and even below 90% AMI, who probably even $100 increase, which is what this ends up being over what they're currently paying, is a real challenge. It's $1,200 a year. So I personally think that everyone's done a great job. I thank Kevin for bringing this back the way he did, and Andy and Lisa. And if there's no more city council comment, I was going to ask for a motion, but go ahead, Councilor Noseworthy.
I was actually just going to move to direct the city manager to negotiate and finalize the terms of an Animas View Mobile Home Park funding assistant agreement with Homes Fund.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Wonderful. Any further discussion? Faye, may we have a vote, please?
Councilor Buell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councilor Bosman?
No.
Councilor Youssef,
Yes.
and Mayor Baxter.
Yes, thank you very much. So now we move on to 12.2.1, the proposed city council retreat agenda. And I believe that's Jose's bailiwick.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and council, I did send out a proposed retreat agenda for review, and I do apologize that it was just today, but was just trying to get everything set up. I will share my screen to show you. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
We do have a 2-day council retreat. I took a look at trying to find what all the council had felt was important to discuss. And for June 8th, looking at an insights review, team building, discussion on workforce and attainable housing, and then organizational efficiency discussion. So that would take our first day, which would be June 8th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Our day 2, which would be from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. also on the following day, June 9th, would discuss the Camino Corridor vision, water capabilities, as well as a recap and status of the 100-day assessment that I had done for the previous council, just bringing on the new council on board on that, as well as just talking about where we are in that process. So this is the retreat agenda that I was able to put together with the information I received from council, and was just looking to see if this direction seems to mesh with the council on that retreat. And if so, we can finalize and start getting staff prepared for it, as well as getting our retreat facilitator on board and making those final preparations.
So are you asking for direction? Is that what you're asking for? Or do you
Yes,
want to vote, or is it just a general nod of the head?
Just a general nod of the head is fine with me, just making sure that the agenda seems to capture what was submitted.
Okay, how about a thumbs up since we're on the little screen? So, or a thumbs down if you don't agree. Okay, awesome. You have 5 thumbs up. I did have one question though, which we do have the SEH report being mentioned here. And I'm hoping that we can all get that before the retreat.
Yes, I have an email. Jared has sent me one. I just haven't caught up with it in regards to where the status is on that report and what chapters have been completed. But I will follow up with council tomorrow when I have that information.
Okay, great. Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy, did you have a thought?
Yes, I actually mentioned with the facilitator today that I thought it would be really helpful if council was willing to share in advance the value each counselor brings to the team that came out of that insights. I know we're going to talk about it, but again, in the issue of efficiency, it'd be helpful to have it and read it and think about it in advance. So I pose that as an opportunity and a question.
So I would say that if counselors wish to share that, they may, and then go forward. And if they're not comfortable until the retreat, that's fine too. Does that work for everybody? Okay. And so it would just be that one page that's the value you bring to the team. It's not
just that one page. Yeah.
Entire profile. Okay. Any other questions or discussions on this item? Wonderful. Let's move on to council reports and actions. And please include, if any of your boards and commissions met these 5 that are listed here during the time, please include that in your reports and actions. Anyone want to go first, or anyone have anything to say?
I can start. We had meetings for the Airport Commission and the Creative Economy Commission. And so I'll just give a couple exciting things that are happening real quick. So just a reminder that the state of Colorado this is Airport Commission. State of Colorado and federal mask order mandating the wear of face masks by all passengers and visitors inside the terminal still going on, so you do have to. But in April 2021, passenger traffic was at 85% of 2019 levels, and we are at DRO outpacing nationwide passenger recovery by approximately 50%. Rehabilitation of the airport's single runway is tentatively planned for 2022. And we're in the project design phase right now. It's currently underway. They're currently looking at some creative and various ways for terminal hold room expansion, especially during delays and cancellations. They're feeling the pressures, and so they're looking at a little outdoor hold area for people to be at during especially those times. And that's kind of the big things there. For the Creative Economy Commission update, there's a lot going on, but a couple highlights. Haley with the Durango Creative District said they had 60 applicants for the art brigade. They have 17 projects going forward throughout our city for installation in the next 1 to 2 months. And there's going to be an outdoor art market at 11th Street weekly from 10 to 2 on Sundays, I think starting this weekend. And it's been really great. 11th Street has realized the benefit that art brings to their business. And so it's that like creative economy happening. And so it's super fun. So there's just a couple awesome things happening.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Anyone else? There was no multimodal advisory board meeting, or who's the liaison for that? Is that you, Olivier?
I think that was last week or the week before.
Yes, so usually you do a council report on a little bit about what happened there, so we know what's going on. Would you like to do that?
I was not prepared for that. I'll make sure I include it next time. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And Library Advisory Board?
It was like the day after our meeting and I didn't know about it. So I will be attending next month.
Okay, and Community Relations Commission?
Sure, I'll jump in. So we met last week, and first of all, we had an update on some of the subcommittees that are working, and one person, Kelsey Bell, is working, kind of heading up the disability access committee, and she's had really positive things to say. She's been working with Kathy Metz and others on the ramp that will go under 32nd Street Bridge to make certain that has the resting spots that are necessary and that the grade will actually work for that. So real kudos to the staff there. We did talk about restrooms, both in terms of ADA accessibility and the real importance of having those buttons that you can push to really be able to get in. And also did talk about when it's a single-use restroom, whether or not it makes sense to suggest to council that we have this be a unisex rather than having people waiting in line to use a bathroom when another one may be empty. So I think that'll be coming to council in the way of a recommendation. The Indigenous Subcommittee also met with City Council, or with Kathy Metz and the team this is on naming of different assets. And I think they're still going forward with some other meetings, but they also had very positive things to say about the working together and the collaboration. And then there's a Latinx kind of subcommittee working. In that group, actually a group of people from the Latinx community have already kind of started to coalesce around the 160 transit and how that was removed. And in their case, removed without their knowledge, in the sense that there wasn't Spanish speaking outreach to them. So they are hoping to actually come back to council and speak to how this impacted them, particularly in ability to get to work in areas there. And so, but in some cases they will need simultaneous interpretation. So that became an issue. We also talked, the advisory board also talked about translation. And I noticed tonight at the beginning of the meeting, we had in Spanish, how to find the captions, where to go to. So that was, I will make certain I take that back to the community relations. And I recognize that we have people who speak other languages than just Spanish in this community and would want access to that subtitles from our meetings. They are looking at ways to spend some of their resources, and they recognize that they would need to come back to council for the approval of that. And there's a summer movie series. And one of the comments was, the library put together its summer activities in both English and Spanish, but just this movie was only in English. And maybe looking at the CRC hosting a movie night that features a Spanish-speaking movie and has English subtitles for folks. So something along that line. So they will be thinking about how to use some of those resources and come back to us with that. And I think the other issue is that there's a real seeking of operational clarity, the whole process of how to do things. And we recognize that this is well, it's not a new advisory board, it's new commissioners coming in. The first time they've had a liaison on the city council. So in some ways, we are kind of finding our way there. And I think that's enough for my report. Thanks.
Any other reports or actions anybody wants to speak to? I will mention that the city manager, Jose, and I met with Farmington's mayor and city manager and had a wonderful discussion down in Farmington about working together regionally to do what's good for our region and what's best economically and how we can make better connections between the two cities and the communities. So we look forward to having continued discussions, and that was, I really enjoyed that conversation. Any other thoughts? All righty, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.